What's up, passionate DJs? Today I'm very excited because this is a video that I've been wanting to put together for a long time now. My review video of the Allen & Heath XONE 96 DJ mixer. This happens to be my favorite DJ mixer on the market, and my first interaction with this mixer was back in NAMM 2019 in California, where they had set up a little booth with a tractor scratch setup, but never really had a chance to really dig into the mixer and learn more about what it's about in practice. And so I reached out to my friends over at the DJ Hookup and I said, hey, it would be really great if you'd let me borrow the XONE 96 so that I could spend some time with it, do a review video for the channel. So when it comes to the sort of situation of meeting my heroes, what did I think? Does it live up to the hype? Well, the short answer is yes. I really love mixing on this thing. Allen & Heath is known for their sound quality, and this is a mixer that has fully analog circuitry. It's great for audio nerds, it's great for anybody who wants to hook up a bunch of stuff, and it's great for anybody who wants it to sound great. I spent some time mixing with this mixer using various different sources. I wanted to kind of put those flexible different inputs to use, so I grabbed a guitar pedal in my Machine Studio, and I hooked up a Denon player, and I just ran 2 or 3 different loops for a while and just tried to get creative with it. I recorded that set and put it on our performances channel, which I've linked down below if you'd like to give that a listen. But overall, I've really enjoyed my time once again with the XONE 96. The whole thing is really solid. It's really heavy. You know, it makes heat when you leave it on for a while. It really feels like an old school, proper, solid piece of audio equipment, but it has that sound card functionality built onto the top so that you can still have that sort of modern digital DJ functionality that you want in case you want to use it with Serato, Tractor, etc. There's one thing I can say about this mixer is that its design is a little fussy. It's busy. There's a lot going on, and if you've never mixed on a XONE mixer before, that can be a little bit intimidating. So we're going to take this mixer step by step and talk about each piece of it and talk about why I love this mixer and maybe a few things that I would change if I ruled the world. Now today we're talking about the XONE 96, which is the company's flagship DJ mixer, meant to deliver the warm heart and analog soul of its predecessor, the XONE 92, while adding digital connectivity. Now the 96 is advertised as a 6+2 channel mixer. We'll talk about more on that later. Unlike most DJ mixers on the market, it contains a 4-band EQ instead of the usual 3. You also won't find any onboard effects, and instead, the XONE 96 has a very flexible send-return system so that you can add effects or sound processors or synthesizers or really whatever your heart desires. And of course, it has those legendary Allen & Heath filters that everyone loves from the old XONE 92. Now the top of the mixer has a classic silver finish, which gives it a somewhat industrial appearance, and everything that you touch feels meaty. There are no accusations of this mixer feeling cheap or gaudy. Put simply, the finish and the build quality are everything that you would expect from a top-tier Allen & Heath product. With great flexibility comes great complexity. So today I'm going to break this mixer down one section at a time and show you that it's really not as complicated as you might think. And speaking of uncomplicated, the best way you can get a XONE mixer is by visiting thedjhookup.com. As with many things right now, product availability is always tricky, which is why the DJ Hookup recommends pre-ordering when it comes to high-end, high-demand gear like the XONE 96. Now, in fact, we spoke to the CEO about this issue in episode 224 of our podcast, titled The Great Hardware Shortage and What to Do About It. The DJ Hookup is the highest rated online retailer of DJ hardware, and that's because they aren't just a store, they are also DJs who want to sell DJ hardware to their friends. Now, they offer a best price guarantee, free shipping on most orders, easy and generous returns, and 6 to 18 month financing. So don't delay, order your XONE mixer now from my friends at the DJ Hookup. Alright, so we're going to start with focusing on what I'm calling the main mixing section. So if we cut out this 4-channel slice of the mixer, you'll find that everything right here is pretty straightforward. Now, there are 2 things which may throw you for a loop, so to speak. The first is the 2 send dials above the source selector. This is sort of part of the mixing section, but for simplicity, we'll come back to it later when we talk about send return. Now the other thing is the fact that it has a 4-band equalizer. Now traditionally you'll have 3 bands here, low, mid, and high. Well, on the Zone 96 and on the 92, the middle band is divided in 2 so that you can have more control. Now, like everything on this mixer, the EQs are smooth and precise. Here's a quick demo of how it sounds. Above the EQs, you can select the source for that channel, phono, line, or either of the onboard USB sound cards. And there's a nice little peak indicator up here too, in case you start clipping and aren't paying enough attention to your meters. Now below the EQs, you'll find a set of switches to assign your filter and your crossfader. And I've got to say, I love these little tiny mechanical toggle switches. It's really never felt so satisfying to assign a channel to a crossfader side. Now this points out something else that you may not be used to if you aren't familiar with Allen and Heath mixers, and that's assignable filter systems rather than a single dial for each channel. Now this is either more or less flexible than the single turn potentiometer you may encounter on other mixers, but we'll come back to this later. Below this we have our assignable cue buttons for monitoring channels in our headphones, and then our 60mm line faders. These feel wonderfully smooth, and the LED meters are bright with pleasing colors. Now below that you'll find the crossfader, which is actually an Innofader Mini, meaning that this Zone is perfectly ready for some scratching and cutting, complete with a replaceable crossfader. In fact, there's very little that this mixer can't do. By the way, the faders all have 3-way curve adjustment, linear, sharp, and somewhere in the middle. You'll find that over here to the side. Interestingly, I found that the sharper curve was my preference for the line faders. Even though I complained about a sharp fader curve in my Model 1 and 1.4 video, this setting actually felt very linear to me, without all the action up at the top end like I might expect. But, you know, of course, this is all up to your personal preference. So there are 2 independent cue systems, meaning that 2 DJs can monitor 2 different things in their headphones. Now these 2 systems work a little bit differently, with Q1 being the main one that you'll use most of the time. Above each line fader we have a cue button, as mentioned before. You select which channel you want to hear in your headphones, and to hear multiple channels you can press more than 1 button at a time. If you push a single cue button, it will cancel the others out. Now, if this drives you crazy like it does me, you can change this behavior by putting it into latch mode. Now, in this mode, the cue buttons are toggles which you can add or remove 1 channel at a time. Now, the way that you set this is by holding any of these 3 filter buttons on each side for 3 seconds. And when you do that, the MIDI lights up here will flash like crazy for a moment. And now it operates more like what I'm used to. If the next DJ on the lineup likes it the other way, they're welcome to change it back. But yes, it does keep this setting permanently until you change it. I actually unplugged the mixer for 5 minutes and then came back to it to verify, and yep, it was still in latch mode. Over to the right is where you control your monitoring. There are small and large jacks for headphones with a volume control right above it. Then you have a cue and master dial, which is a mix dial for what you're hearing in your headphones, more of the cued track or more of the master output. Now here you can enable split cue, where you hear the cue and master in separate ears in your headphones. And then here's where you can enable post-EQ monitoring. This just means that you can choose whether you're hearing the unchanged track in your headphones or if you're hearing it after it's been modified by your EQ. Now the active light comes on whenever any cue button is enabled. The secondary cue system is great for handovers to the next DJ or for duo DJs who mix together. This system is a lot simpler, but therefore a lot more limited than the primary cue system. You have the same volume and cue/master controls, but instead of all the cue buttons to select what you're hearing, you can just select one channel which you'd like to monitor with this dial here on the left. Now this could be any of the sound channels 1 through 4 or A through D, or simply the master output. So the limitations are here that you can't use split cue, you'll always be post EQ, meaning you'll always hear the EQ changes in your headphones, and you can only select one cue channel at a time. There are still a few quick oddities to discuss when it comes to cueing on the Zone 96, so unlike most other mixers, when you have no cue option selected, you'll be hearing the master output in your headphones. Meaning there's no real way to go silent in your headphones except for turning the volume all the way down or selecting an empty channel, I guess. There's not necessarily anything wrong with this kind of setup, it's just a little bit unusual. But my biggest complaint is the fact that the cue system is pre-filter, meaning there is no way to hear the changes of the filter in your headphones before putting them live. That's a huge shame. As we'll talk about in the next section, the filters are about as high quality as DJ mixers get. Yet this is a huge issue for my particular workflow. Most DJ mixers and controllers these days have single knob filters where the 12 o'clock position is 0 or a fully dry signal. Turning to the right enables a high pass filter and turning to the left enables a low pass filter. Zone mixers have an independent filter system, or 2 of them in the case of the 96, which is assigned per channel. So you flip the filter toggle switch to assign it to filter 1 or filter 2. And then this allows you to select which of the filters you'll be using and also gives you a way to apply the same filter to multiple channels. Both of these systems are the same, so let's just focus on filter 1. Your frequency knob is here at the bottom, and the 0 position is all the way to the left, not 12 o'clock. These 3 buttons are where you select the type of filter, whether it's high pass or low pass, or even a band pass filter. So if you don't already know, the high pass allows audio above the selected frequency, low pass allows audio below it, and band pass sort of allows a strip of audio through, or a notch with the top and bottom cut off. Now above this you'll find a resonance knob which goes from mild to wild. Now this allows you to select the sort of squelchiness of your audio filter. So basically mild gives you that crisp, clean, almost invisible filter sound, whereas the wild setting exaggerates the audio around the selected frequency, which gives it that sort of swooshy effect. So here's a demo. And then there's crunch. Crunch is a controlled harmonic distortion effect that sits before the filter. So this is sort of similar to the drive control that I demoed on the Model 1.4. The idea is that you can adjust the level where the preamplifier clips the input signal, which can sort of create a harmonic distortion as a creative effect. So in other words, it makes it sound crunchy. Now, this is an easy effect to overdo, but when used subtly, it can add some extra life and add harmonics to an otherwise lifeless track. So this could be useful, for example, when mixing worn vinyl classics with modern digital productions. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the send and return network on the Zone 96. And this is where it's really going to start to become clear, if it wasn't already, just how flexible this mixer is as far as connectivity and routing and stuff like that. So the basic idea there is that you could take any signal, send it out to something that will process that sound, like this guitar pedal here that I borrowed from my neighbor. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. You could send it out to that thing, have it process the audio, and then return it to a channel, which you can do anything you want with. So, for example, I have a little loop going over here. And of course, I can do all the normal things to it. I can EQ it, or apply filters to it. But what if I want to do more to it? What if I want to send it to this effects pedal and have it do some wacky stuff to it? Well, let's go ahead and send this signal through the send one, and then we'll return it to channel A here, and we'll see what it sounds like. See how the lights come on over here as we're sending it? It's coming in a little bit quieter because I've got the low EQ turned down and stuff, because I don't want my effect to be rumbly. And by the way, you'll notice that our return B channel here is reacting to my voice. See, watch, check, 1, 2. And so that's another thing that you can use channels A and B for, are microphones. Anyhow, we're going to bring the normal signal up here, and then we're going to bring in the affected signal over here on our return channel. Just gives you the flexibility to kind of mix however you want. Now you'll notice that right now when we send this signal to the guitar pedal and back, it's always receiving a signal even if we're turned down here. If we want to change that, we can push this pre button up here, and this changes between pre-fader and post-fader. So here's the difference. If we turn it off, you'll notice that we're no longer sending this song over to here, unless we turn this up. Then we see it show up on the meters. Notice if I push this button in again, now it's receiving a signal over here, even if I don't have this turned up. Now if you look over here at the return channels A and B, you'll notice that it doesn't have a 4-band EQ, it has a 3-band EQ, but it's still a little bit different. So your middle band is split here, where you can choose the frequency and sweep it. So you're basically selecting the frequency that the middle band is affecting. Sounds like a normal cut of a mid EQ, but we can also sweep the frequency that it's affecting. So if you look over down under the EQs, you'll see that you can also assign channels A and B to filters, just like you can the main mixing channels. Over here we have two more return channels. This is where the +2 comes in the 6+2 channel naming. I know it's a little bit confusing, but basically these are almost like auxiliary return channels. These are basically 1/4-inch jacks on the back that you could use to connect anything. Synthesizer, a rack of gear, whatever you have. Anything that has kind of its own control. You don't need to worry about EQing it or anything. You just need a basic volume level to bring it in, and then an ability to to cue it inside your headphones here, and just turn it on and off. This would also be a great way to, say, daisy chain another DJ mixer in, or two. You can pretty much connect whatever you want to this thing, as we're going to talk about as we go look around the back of the unit to talk about connectivity. But just to quickly summarize how this all works, each of the main mixing channels has an ability to send the signal out to either send 1 or send 2. You can choose whether or not that's pre or post EQ. And then you can return those channels over here to return A and return B, where you can get creative with your mixing. You can do all the things that you can do over here on the mixing board, including assign it to a filter, EQ the signal. You can also decide to assign A or B to a microphone channel, or you can use it to have a USB return through your computer. And then there are also channels C and D, which are great for just adding like a whole chunk of gear or a separate mixer or a synthesizer or anything that you don't necessarily need creative control over, but you want to work into the mix. Now here on the back of the mixer you might feel that this is also pretty intimidating looking, but just like on the top of the mixer, we're going to break this down piece by piece and show you that it's not so bad. And the first thing that I'm going to do is just cover up all of these 1/4 inch jacks, this whole send and return kind of network. And once we do that, you can see that everything here is pretty much like a standard DJ mixer now. We have our RCA jacks for our inputs, we have 4-line inputs, and we have 4 phono preamps. So you could hook up 4 turntables to this. I'm going to go ahead and plug in my little null jacks here real quick to those phonos. And you can see this is even simpler now. There's not a whole lot to look at here. We've got our 2 mic inputs here. Once again, those are shared with your return channels A and B. Over here to the left of our line inputs, we also have a record output, set of RCA jacks there. That is a pre-master output that always puts out a consistent level so that you can connect it to something to record. Interestingly enough, you also have an audio sync out over here. Now, Allen and Heath in the manual says that this is for expanding in the future to other Allen and Heath gear. But the interesting thing about this is basically just another secondary record output, so you could connect a 3.5mm jack to that and use it as a secondary record out. So for example, perhaps you want to use your master output here, your XLRs, to output to the house mixer. Then you want to hook a recording device up to this, and then you could hook this up to a separate live stream rig, for example. So once again, lots of flexibility, as we can see on the back here of the mixer. Over here on the left, you'll see our USB 1 and 2. Once again, this is a dual sound card unit, so you do have 2 of them here, so you can support 2 DJs or 2 different laptops doing 2 different things. Maybe one's connected to Ableton, one's connected to your DJ software. You could use it to do handovers between different DJs. Also, you have a MIDI out over here, so if you are connecting to a MIDI rig and you want to send a MIDI clock, something like that, you can do that with this. You have your X-Link port, and this is essentially just used to connect to the Zone K series of controllers. And it kind of lets you save USB ports on your laptop. You can plug that stuff straight into your mixer. And of course, if you are using turntables, you have 2 ground pegs here. And then besides the power button and power connector over here, that's all that there is to it on the main pieces of the mixer. So let's go ahead and take away our blocking here, and now we can also see the whole send return network going on, and this is all the stuff that we were playing with earlier up on the top of the mixer. So here's where send 1 and send 2 come out. Now send 1 is selectable here, and what's happening here is you can change this between a high level output or a line level output. This literally means you could connect something that is like a instrument level signal, like a guitar, plug it straight into this mixer, and you'll be fine. So you would select what type of instrument or what type of level you're connecting with that right there. So we have our send 1, send 2, and then our return channel. So this is where we have our A, B, C, and D from the top. So really everything from here over is our send return system. Here we have our booth output for controlling your local monitors, and we have another master output with 1/4-inch jacks right here. And then we have a master insert. So we'll come back to that in a second, but I want you to look over here at all these send and returns. So in our demo earlier, I connected this little Eventide guitar pedal. I connected the send one out to the input of this pedal, and then I returned it to the mixer, and then we were able to run it on its own channel. Now if you look up here, a lot of these left channels here, they say L/M. What that means is left or mono. So if you're connecting to this guitar pedal right here, which if you look on the back, it only has a single output jack, which means that it's going to be a single mono output. And so if you just plug it into the left side, then that's how you run a mono signal instead of a stereo signal. And then finally we have our master insert. So this is if you want to take the entire output, the master output of the mixer, send it out to, say, an effects processor, a compressor, limiter, or whatever it is that you want to, however it is you're processing your sound, send it out to that box and then return it back to the mixer. You could send the master output using these. So lots of audio output routing options on here, and that's why you have so many connections with these 1/4-inch jacks. But once again, once you cover up those things, it's just your basic DJ mixer. So don't be intimidated by it. Just realize that there are a lot of ways to connect different things, whether it's synthesizers, whether it's microphones, whether it's guitars, other DJ mixers. Really great options for just about any DJ/musician. So I reached out to our passionate DJ community and asked for their thoughts on the Zone 96. Anthony says that my only beef is that they didn't add digital inputs with high quality DACs for connecting digital media players. And that's a fair point. You know, even though this is an analog mixer at heart, it does have digital circuitry, what with that sound card and everything, so it's a little weird to not be able to use your digital coaxial connections if your high-end players have them. Clovis talks about how the new phono preamps are a lifesaver compared to the much weaker ones on the Zone 92. He says, finally, you can play records against digital and CD, and they have all the power you need. Now, this is something that I've actually complained about on other Zone mixers. In fact, if you go way back on this channel to my review of the Zone 23C, you'll hear me talk about just that.
That means if I have a particularly quiet record, I would be afraid that I wouldn't be able to get it loud enough.
So folks, there you have it. That is my favorite mixer, the Zone 96. I really love that this is both a fusion of old and new school type of technology. I love the sound quality. I really love how the internal mixing bus sounds. And so what I'm saying is, when I bring mixers here into the studio, this isn't a properly sound treated room, you know, and so when people say, how's the sound quality, I say, well, it sounds good, but everything sounds pretty good. But one thing I really notice about the Zone 96 is everything, all of the components sound good. The 4-band EQ sounds nice and clean and crisp. The filters sound amazing. Allen & Heath is world-renowned for their filters. The way that everything blends together inside the mix bus sounds really good, and that's something that you can hear inside your headphones, in your MP3 player on a recording. You're putting a lot of different sources together, and you want to be able to blend them together without it sounding too crazy, too busy, too distorted, anything like that. If that's you, if you really want an expandable setup that can grow with you, possibly a forever mixer, then the Zone might be for you. Now, what are the 1 or 2 things that I might change? In other words, what keeps this from being my full dream mixer? Even though it has these amazing sounding, crispy, clean, adjustable, assignable filters on them, you can't preview the filter sound in your headphones. If you're like me and you like to do a lot of mixing with filters as if they were EQs, then that can be a little frustrating when I can't hear the exact point that I want the filter setting to be at when I bring the track in. That is something that you can learn to work around, but it is something that affects my workflow directly. That brings me to my other sort of complaint about this mixer, which is the design of it is very busy. There's just a lot going on here, and obviously the more you use a piece of equipment, the more you get used to it, and you can overcome those hurdles. I'm not saying that people aren't smart enough to learn how to use this mixer, but I also always really appreciate simple design, especially when it comes to something that you might be using to perform with in a live environment. So for example, there's a lot of adjustability here. There's a lot of, with the 4-band EQs, that's great. But then if these have 4-band EQs, why do A and B have, this kind of weird 3-band EQ with the adjustable mid-band? Why not just make this also a 4-band EQ, or even just a regular 3-band EQ? My dream version of this would just have this same kind of 4-band EQ duplicated over here. You'd be able to hear the filters that you're previewing in your headphones whenever you cue them. And then the only other thing that I would say is, as much as I love Allen & Heath Zone filters, I find the assignable filters to be actually a little bit of a pain, as opposed to having a filter that's dedicated to each channel. So my dream version of this mixer would have both of those things. It would probably sacrifice filter 2. It would have one assignable filter, just like many Allen & Heath mixers do, but then, much like the Model 1 and 1.4 mixers by Play Differently, you would have a low pass and high pass filter above and below the EQ, so that you would have like your 4-band EQ and then a cutoff at the top and a cutoff at the bottom for each channel. And then if you wanted, you could still have an assignable filter where you could do this low pass, band pass, high pass. This might be a me problem, but sometimes when there's assignable filters, it's often hard to remember if I've assigned a channel to a particular filter, and it gets a little bit confusing when you're doing a low pass versus a high pass, because now the left is actually cutting the sound to it gets a little bit confusing when you change directions here. And so I like the approach of the Model 1 a little bit better when it comes to that, but I think its EQ is too complicated. So I think some fusion of those two mixers would be my dream mixer. But what do you think? Post it up in the comments below. How close is this to your dream mixer? I've got to say, all those things aside, those are kind of minor complaints. This mixer is amazing. I would be honored to own one, and perhaps I will someday, because it really makes a lot of sense for somebody who likes to expand and change their setup often, which I do. So I hope you enjoyed this review of the Zone 96. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this. Also, don't forget about the DJ Hookup. If you're interested in a Zone mixer, they're the best place to get it. Head over to thedjhookup.com and tell them David from Passionate DJ sent you. And once again, keep on spinning.